In the first part of the story, Ethan returns late at night from his business trip, already feeling the fatigue and longing for the comfort of his home. However, as he turns onto his quiet suburban street, he notices something off, a strange car parked in his driveway. His brows knit together in confusion, a seed of unease beginning to take root. The vehicle is sleek, unfamiliar, an unexpected guest, perhaps? Ethan hesitates, his hand gripping the steering wheel as he assesses the situation. This car, resting confidently in the shadows, doesn't belong to any of their friends nor family. The neighborhood is silent, even the crickets seem to pause as if sensing the tension brewing within him. He cuts the engine and steps out, his senses now heightened, alert to every creak of the night. Approaching his front door, he notices the dim light filtering through the curtains, casting faint shadows against the walls inside. He sees movement of figure, and then another, close together in the living room. As he peers through the narrow gap, he spots Ava in the arms of a man, both of them entwined in a way that leaves no room for misinterpretation. His breath catches, the weight of disbelief settling heavy in his chest. Ethan's heart pounds, a visceral thud echoing in his ears, and for a moment he's paralyzed, his mind refusing to process what he's seeing. Ava, his wife, is pressed against the man, her fingers tracing gentle lines down his back, her lips moving close to his ear as she whispers something that pulls a quiet laugh from him. The intimacy between them is unmistakable, a cruel display unfolding right in the home Ethan had worked so hard to build with her. He clenches his fists, feeling the bite of his nails in his palms as he watches them. His pulse races with a chaotic mix of disbelief, anger, and grief. His mind spins, desperate to make sense of what's happening. There had been signs, of course, distant looks. Night she'd claimed exhaustion, a growing aloofness that he'd dismissed as the strains of life, work, routine. But nothing had prepared him for this. Ethan forces himself to move, taking one slow, deliberate step after another until he's at the front door. He takes a deep breath, calming himself, trying to pull the pieces of his shattered thoughts into something solid enough to confront her. Turning the handle, he steps into the dim hallway, his shoes soundless against the floor. The living room is partially shadowed, but he can see them clearly now, Ava and the man frozen as his presence registers. Her eyes widen when she sees him, a fleeting look of guilt flashing across her face, quickly replaced by something harder, colder. "Ethan," she says, her voice tight. She straightens, subtly putting distance between herself and her lover. The man says nothing, looking away awkwardly, as if he's suddenly found the walls of their home fascinating. Ethan's gaze remains locked on Ava, the woman he shared a life with, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone. He struggles to find words, but all that comes out is a strained "why?" Ava's expression is unreadable as she crosses her arms, studying him for a moment. "Why?" she repeats, almost incredulous. "I think you know why, Ethan." Her tone is so flat, so lacking in the remorse or panic he'd half expected, that it throws him off balance. He stares at her, waiting for more, for any hint of the woman he thought she was, but her face remains impassive. The silence stretches until she finally lets out a sigh. "With him," she says, nodding toward her lover, "everything just feels right." There's no apology in her words, no explanation that feels even remotely sufficient. Only a detached honesty that cuts deeper than any betrayal. Ethan feels something break within him, a tether snapping, leaving him adrift in the cold, hollow ache of her words. He'd come here seeking answers, maybe even the possibility of salvaging something, but her expression leaves no room for anything, except the crushing reality of what he's lost. He turns, feeling a dark resolve settle in the pit of his stomach as he walks back out into the night. This pain, he realizes, will not break him. No, he will carry it, use it, let it sharpen him. Ava may have thought she'd found something better, but he would not be a man scorned quietly. Ethan steps outside, the cool night air biting against his skin, and leans against the hood of his car, his mind a storm of tangled thoughts. His hands shake slightly, not from the cold but from the whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and grief thrumming beneath his calm exterior. He draws a long, shuddering breath, trying to regain control. Everything he thought he knew, every certainty he'd built his life around, lies shattered inside that house. He looks back at the dimly lit windows, their warm glow mocking him, reminding him of all the nights he'd spent here feeling safe, feeling home. Tonight, it feels like a cruel illusion, like he's glimpsed a world that was never really his. Footsteps on the porch jolt him from his thoughts. It's Ava. She steps outside, folding her arms, her face unreadable, as she watches him from a few feet away. For a moment they just stand there, a distance between them that feels more insurmountable than any physical space. "Are you just going to stand there?" she asks, her voice sharper than he expected, as if his pain is somehow inconveniencing her. Ethan forces himself to look at her, really look at her. "I don't even know who you are," he says quietly. There's no anger in his voice, only a sadness that she cannot ignore, that even she seems to flinch at before quickly masking it with a defensive glare. "What did you expect, Ethan?" she says, her tone growing colder. "You're gone all the time. You live for your work. And when you're here, it's like you're somewhere else, wrapped up in your own world. I'm just tired of being the one who's waiting." Ethan's jaw tightens. The accusation stings, but it doesn't change the hurt carved deep into his chest. "So that's it. You blame me. And it makes this okay." He gestures back toward the house, unable to finish the thought, the betrayal too raw to put into words. Ava shrugs, her gaze shifting to the ground. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done." "What's done is done," Ethan repeats, incredulous. He searches her face for any hint of the woman he'd loved, but he finds only indifference, a wall that makes it clear she's already let go, that she let go long before he ever suspected. The silence stretches, heavy and cold. Finally, she looks up, her gaze meeting his. "I never asked you to forgive me," she says, her voice steady, almost mechanical. "And I don't need it." Her words are a final blow, one that solidifies the resolve hardening inside him. He realizes with painful clarity that the woman he loved is gone, replaced by a stranger standing before him, a stranger who no longer cares about the promises they made, the years they spent building a life together. Ethan nods slowly, the ghost of a bitter smile flickering on his lips. "You're right. You don't need anything from me." The anger he's been holding back simmers beneath his calm exterior, but he doesn't let it show. Instead, he takes one last look at her, memorizing the coldness in her eyes. Without another word, he gets back into his car and drives away, the silence in the car oppressive, yet oddly freeing. As he leaves the quiet street behind, he knows that his life has changed forever. He feels no sadness now, only a steady, smoldering determination. This won't be the end of him. If anything, it's a beginning, one he will forge on his own terms, and one that Ava will come to regret. For the first time that night, Ethan feels a strange sense of clarity. He doesn't know what he'll do next, but he knows one thing: he won't be the broken man she left behind. He will find a way to turn this pain into strength, to use it as fuel. Whatever it takes, he will make sure Ava understands the consequences of her choices. Ethan drives through the empty streets, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he navigates in silence. The streetlights cast fleeting shadows across the dashboard, mirroring the turbulence within him. His mind cycles through flashes of memories: their wedding day, quiet evenings spent together, the promises they'd made. Each memory feels distant now, tainted by her betrayal and her chilling indifference. Ava's words echo in his mind, sharp and relentless. With him, everything just feels right. He'd never imagined she could be so cold, so unflinching. Finally, he pulls over into an empty parking lot and shuts off the engine. The silence is deafening, and the reality of his shattered marriage settles heavily on his shoulders. He feels an urge to scream, to release the anger roiling inside him, but he forces himself to stay composed. He is beyond brokenness, he is beyond grief. What he feels now is something darker, a quiet, consuming rage. Ethan pulls his phone from his pocket and scrolls through his contacts, his thumb hovering over Ava's name. The familiar letters blur slightly as he stares at them, wrestling with the impulse to call her, to demand more answers, to make her understand the depths of the pain she's caused. But he realizes, with a clarity that surprises him, that there's no point. Ava made her choice, and she made it clear she has no regrets. His finger hovers for a second longer before he deletes her contact entirely. It feels symbolic, a small act of reclaiming control, of taking the first step away from the life he built with her. Ethan leans back in his seat, staring up at the dark sky through the windshield. His mind begins to drift, calculating the steps he'll take next. He isn't a man to lash out impulsively, but he also isn't one to simply walk away. Ava may have found someone who makes her feel right, but she'll come to understand just how wrong she was to think he would accept this betrayal quietly. In the days that follow, Ethan goes through the motions, handling work with meticulous precision, masking his inner turmoil behind a calm, collected demeanor. Colleagues notice a subtle change in him, a focused intensity, a new drive that borders on ruthlessness. He works long hours, staying late, occupying his mind with tasks that keep him from dwelling on the pain. But even amidst the late nights and endless meetings, he finds himself preparing for the next step in his plan, each detail meticulously considered. Ethan begins his quiet investigation. He contacts an old friend from college, someone who specializes in discreet information gathering. He learns about the man who had taken his place in Ava's life, a name, a background, little details that start to fill in the blanks. The man is a smooth-talking, successful executive at a nearby firm, the type who thinks he's untouchable, who probably believes he can get away with anything. Ethan's lips tighten at the thought, a plan already forming in the back of his mind. But his revenge will not be reckless or impulsive. No, it will be deliberate, calculated. He will dismantle every part of the life they share, leaving Ava with nothing but the ruins of what she once thought she could have without consequence. His focus shifts, sharpening like the edge of a blade honed by pain and betrayal. He won't go down as some heartbroken man she can pity. Instead, he will be the reckoning she never saw coming. The final pieces of his plan start to fall into place, and with them comes a sense of control he hasn't felt since the night he returned to find her with another man. He understands now that this betrayal will mark the beginning of a new version of himself, one no longer held back by blind loyalty or misplaced trust. He'll become a man who answers betrayal with strength and cunning, a man who reclaims his dignity on his own terms. And as he takes the first steps down this new path, Ethan feels a glimmer of satisfaction, knowing that Ava will soon realize her choice came at a cost far greater than she could have imagined. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's plan unfolds with meticulous precision, each move calculated, each step purposeful. During the day, he continues working as usual, his colleagues none the wiser to the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. But each night, in the solitude of his home, his now empty home, he delves deeper into his preparation, refining every detail of his quiet revenge. Ethan's first step is subtle but effective. He begins by reaching out to people in his professional network who might intersect with Ava's new lover. Through his contacts, he learns that the man, Richard Hayes, holds a high-ranking position at a reputable investment firm. On the surface, Richard appears to be a man with a spotless reputation, but as Ethan digs deeper, he uncovers the threads of a different story, a reputation built on manipulation, shady deals, and barely legal loopholes. It's enough to start unraveling Richard's world from the inside out. Ethan's friend from college, Jack, assists him in discreetly gathering information. Jack, a private investigator with access to financial records and connections in law enforcement, becomes an invaluable ally. Together, they pull records of Richard's transactions and affiliations, piecing together a pattern of unethical dealings. Ethan smiles grimly at the findings. Here was a man who believed himself untouchable. But Ethan would change that. Ethan's next move is to start subtly influencing Richard, standing in his professional circles. A few carefully placed tips to investigative reporters, shared with an air of concerned anonymity, spark rumors about Richard's underhanded tactics. Soon enough, whispers circulate within the industry, raising suspicion about his methods and casting doubt on his integrity. Ethan knows that it's only a matter of time before the cracks in Richard's pristine image begin to show. But his plan doesn't stop at Richard. Ava's betrayal is a wound that cuts deeper than any professional slight, and Ethan intends for her to feel the consequences too. She may have thought her affair was private, that her secret would never see the light of day, but Ethan sees to it that everyone in their social circle becomes aware of her actions. He never outright exposes her, he's too careful for that, but he knows just how to stir suspicion, letting her so-called friends piece the story together. Rumors are enough. In their tight-knit circle, a whiff of scandal is all it takes to dismantle reputations. Then comes the most ruthless part of his plan. Ethan learns that Richard had once considered a merger with a smaller firm, one that could easily expose his history of unscrupulous dealings. In a quiet backroom discussion, Ethan secures a meeting with the head of that firm, presenting him with the evidence Jack uncovered. The deal collapses before Richard ever gets a chance to negotiate, and the blow hits hard. Richard's superiors, already wary from the rumors, begin to scrutinize his actions more closely, watching his every move. Ethan can almost imagine the frustration on Richard's face as his once carefully controlled life starts to slip out of his grasp. One evening, as Ethan reviews the latest reports from Jack, he receives a text message from Ava. It's the first he's heard from her since he left that night. She asks if they can talk. She says she wants to apologize, to explain. For a moment, a flicker of his old feelings surfaces, a painful memory of the love he once had for her, but it's quickly extinguished by the memory of her cold, indifferent words. He lets the message sit unanswered, deciding that silence is the response she deserves. Days pass, and Richard's troubles mount. His company suspends him pending an investigation, and soon after he's forced to step down, his career in shambles. Ethan reads about it in a business journal, the news confirming the success of his plan. Richard's downfall is complete, his reputation beyond repair, and Ethan feels the first true sense of closure since the night he discovered the betrayal. But revenge, he finds, is not as sweet as he once thought. It has given him a sense of control, of power, but it hasn't erased the hurt, the betrayal, or the emptiness. One evening, Ethan finds himself alone in his living room, surrounded by the silence of his empty house. The memories linger, haunting him with their unrelenting presence. He realizes with a clarity that almost feels like relief that it's time to let go not just of Ava or of Richard, but of the anger he's been harboring. It has driven him, sustained him, but it has also kept him chained to the past, to a life he no longer wants. He needs to move forward, to find meaning in something beyond vengeance. In the weeks that follow, Ethan redirects his focus. He closes the chapter on his revenge, choosing instead to pour his energy into rebuilding his life. He takes up new hobbies, reconnects with old friends, and slowly begins to rediscover himself outside of his marriage. It's not easy, and there are still nights when the loneliness and hurt resurface, but each day he feels the weight lifting, little by little. One day he receives another message from Ava, but this time he feels nothing when he sees her name on the screen. Without a second thought, he deletes it, his heart lighter, his mind clearer. He has finally freed himself from the ghosts of that night. Ethan may have lost the life he thought he'd have, but he's gained something far more important: resilience, self-respect, and the knowledge that he is stronger than he ever realized. And as he steps forward into a future unknown, he feels ready for whatever lies ahead, knowing he will never let betrayal define him again.